Us. Hello. Thanks for coming. I'm going to do a reading today from the Gospel according to John. No, I'm going to do a reading today from Budo Karate, a new chapter that it wasn't in the previous book, but it's in this one. Before I do, Patreon family, you have no idea what a difference it's making. Thank you very much. If you're not a Patreon member, by all means, get along and share the love because it really does help. And if you think you're getting anything out of these online videos, then by all means, come and join the Patreon family and show your love. Frederick, Rochelle, Al, Urs, good to see you. Urs Budi, Urs, all the way from Indonesia. Nice to see you. Oh, I got a good T-shirt on today too. See this? This is, I'm going to write this in. Bobby Alu. Oh, nothing beats a paperbark tree for a good makiwara. Bobby Alu. Check out Bobby Alu online. Bobby, his dad, I've mentioned him before, I'm sure. Daniel, Mike Clark, Us. I'm glad it's sunny. Mike Lorden, all the way from Florida, Miami, FLA. Chrissy, Us, Paul, Chrissy Dunn. Nice to see you. Marco. Yeah, Bobby Alu. Chrissy knows Bobby Alu. Bobby Alu's dad, Rob, has been training in Kyokushin with us. He started as a white belt in the same dojo as me. He's a little older than me. He's about 15 years older. So when I was a little boy, he was in his late 20s. I didn't have a lot to do with him, obviously, then. But since then, we worked together, and he's still training at 78 years old. It's fantastic. And his son, Bobby, is a fantastic musician. And actually, Bobby sang at my wedding. And it was really great because I had people turning up to the wedding, looking at him, their jaws dropping, going, dude, what's going on? Bobby Alu's here singing live. But anyway, this is his new T-shirt from his new album. Go and check out Bobby. And I think there's plenty of him on YouTube too for free. So go and check it out. If you like it, maybe download a couple of his songs. Look, I'm really excited because every day the book is getting so close and I'm just really, really thrilled about it. So today I'm going to read a chapter which is quite controversial, not because of what it's about, but because of who it's about. And I decided to include this chapter because I think the person that it's about is very important to Kyokushin, even though he left Kyokushin even before the World Tournament, actually. And he's got a very acerbic way of going about things. Some people don't understand tact. And like Yogananda said, truth without tact is not much good. Sometimes you just got to be a little more tactful. Yeah, Bobby did Kyokushin. I forgot to mention that. Bobby and his brother trained Kyokushin. And I think they probably still do. Us, Tony Palmieri. Ciao, bello. And yeah, they train. I mean, Bobby doesn't train anymore because he tours a lot. There's a group called Xavier Rudd. You may have heard of him. I'd never heard of him before, Bobby. But their drummer went sick one day, and Bobby just happened to be doing the opening act on the concert. And they said, "Oh, we're in big trouble, the drummers." And he said, "I'll do it for you." And he plays a ukulele. They said, "No, we need a drummer." He said, "Actually, the local Queensland Conservatorium of Music, that's where he did his degree in fine arts in percussion. So he's actually really good drummer. And he ended up, now he tours with Xavier Rudd. Anyway, that's Bobby right there. There, Herman, Urs, Daniel, Mike. Yes, you hit the nail on the head right there. But look, this chapter, let me just get right into it. What page am I on here? 183. I'm so excited. I wish I could show you screenshots of the book as it's Willie and I are working on stitching it together. It's going to be very beautiful. But I'm just going to go back to this chapter about here. And I postpone reading it for now because it is controversial. But I really like this guy. He is a tremendously talented martial artist, and everyone has word. Oh, everyone has heard of Don Drager. Don Drager was a great martial artist. His judo was superlative. Apparently, some Japanese say that he was the best ground technician at the Kodokan during his era. Don Drager also, he and Robert Smith wrote some great books on the martial arts. And Jon Bluming, the fellow I wrote this chapter about, was their flatmate, their roommate, and they trained together when they were training at Kodokan. It was Harry. And so he has some real history, and he's very important, you know. But anyway, let me read the chapter. And there's a couple of anecdotes I'll add to it. One of them tends to make me tear up a little bit, but if I can hold it together, I'll share it. Otherwise, I'm not going to share it. Okay, this chapter's about Jon Bluming. One well-known and controversial personality from the Oyama Dojo days is the late Jon Bluming, 1933 to 2018. He died in December, I think December 27, 2018. His funeral was a few days later. Would you believe, I flew from Johan Samuel. Thanks for coming, man. You don't have to remind me, I know I'm here. I flew over, would you believe, from Australia to Holland for his funeral, went straight from the airport, checked into a little hotel, dropped my bags, had a shower, got changed, jumped on the train, caught the train out to the funeral, attended the funeral, and it was quite an interesting funeral. There was some real who's who of the Dutch martial arts world were there, and he received a very beautiful military honor funeral as well. He was very highly respected in the Dutch Marines. Bluming was a powerful all-round martial artist who stood 6'5", which is 193 centimeters, and 225 pounds, which is 102 Ks. As a judoka, he was one of the best. Whilst training at the Kodokan, Bluming was introduced to Masoyama and the Oyama Dojo by his friend and roommate, Don Drager. Bluming had trained briefly in Shotokan, but found the energy of the Oyama Dojo more to his liking. Bluming first traveled to Asia with the Dutch military. His first tour of duty to Korea was in 1950 at just 17. By the end of the Korean conflict, Bluming had become highly recognized for acts of bravery as he fought alongside US soldiers. Some say he's actually the highest decorated Dutch Marine ever, but I wasn't able to confirm it, so I didn't put that in the book. But I'll add that here. Bluming also received 3 Purple Hearts. After being wounded the first time, Bluming was shipped to Tokyo. Most people get a Purple Heart and don't go back. He just kept going back. Gets shot, patch up, back he goes. It's pretty courageous for a teenager. He was shipped to Tokyo for treatment and recovery. It was at that time that he witnessed a judo demonstration by the great 10th Dan Mifune Kyuzo that changed his life. Bluming was, to borrow an endearing metaphor from Yogananda, like a mouthful of hot molasses, too hot to swallow and too sticky to spit out. There is absolutely no denying his skills, courage, and experience, which Oyama recognized immediately. When it came to expressing his opinion about everything and everyone, from judo to Kyokushin, however, his no-holds-barred, often politically incorrect directness was always controversial. If you had confidence in yourself, there was no offense taken. If you had any doubts about your training, his directness could sting like a snake bite. Extra space there I don't need. Come on, let me get in there. Bluming did not suffer fools. There is no doubt Bluming loved and respected his teacher Masoyama. His opinions about training and politics were even more strongly influenced by his friend and Kyokushin mentor, Kurosaki Kenji, who lived in Holland, teaching and training at Bluming's dojo for 1 year in 1966. His opinions were pretty strongly influenced. Gaza, good to see you. His opinions were pretty strongly influenced by Kurosaki, and there were certain things that went on which I won't put on record between Sosai and Kurosaki that encouraged Kurosaki to start to distance himself from Sosai. Not Sosai's doing, by the way. So he had a few things to say. Often they weren't accurate, a little bit vindictive. And that's where Jon Bluming got a lot of his information from. So he wasn't necessarily speaking what he'd heard directly. He was repeating what he'd heard secondhand without any proof. But that's not the point. I just made it the point, didn't I? Bluming did not agree with many of the decisions made both before and after Oyama's passing. He withdrew from Masaoyama's Kyokushin organization in 1971. As a result, he is far less known in Kyokushin circles outside of Holland than many other high-profile students of Masaoyama. His controversial comments endeared him to very few, something which I personally believe saddened him in the later years. What goes around indeed comes around. Nevertheless, I feel it's important that he is known. I actually found him quite humorous. He had a real underlying sense of humor to what he said. I mean, like I said, he didn't suffer fools lightly, so he would speak his point, but I would just look at him and shake my head and just go, you know, you're not going to make friends by saying that. He goes, shrugs his shoulder, what can I do, you know? He did some. He could really whack, Torbjörn. He did that. People say this is useless. I find this, if you've trained it, it's good as a strike. But I got to tell you, it's funny you should say that, Torbjörn. We were discussing this at training on Wednesday. Nakayubi Ponkan. How useless is it? No, we came to the conclusion that it's incredibly useful, and one day I'll show you how. But he would strike with it too, and he actually got in trouble once. He nearly killed a guy because he hit him with Nakayubi Ippon-ken. A number of people attacked him with knives. There was evidence. He didn't get charged. Witnesses said he was in self-defense, but he's whacked this guy and he's broken his cheekbone, ruptured his eardrum, and in snapping the jaw, he severed, luckily quite lightly, an artery. I think it might have been the carotid artery, got a small tear in it. And so they spent 10 hours trying to keep this guy alive. And finally he did survive. And when it went to court, he wasn't charged because of self-defense. But yes, that Nakayubi Ippon-ken was his thing. I've never trained it enough for striking, but I use it in grappling a lot. And one of the best ways is when you're trying to get a choke on and they're defending, you come in with the Nakayubi Ippon-ken like this and put it on the sternocleidomastoid, the jugular, the nerve here, the carotid sinus nerve, and it just opens their hands up completely, ready for the choke. Please give us plenty of stuff if you got information about Bluming, because I actually really like the guy and I think he's very important in many respects. In Holland, Bluming's influence on the martial arts is absolutely beyond question. His judo student Wilhelm Ruska is twice world champion and the only judoka to win 2 gold medals in the One Olympics in 1972, heavyweight and openweight. His indirect impact, along with that of Kurosaki Kenji, on the world of kickboxing through the gyms of his students, Lucien Carbin, this guy's amazing. Look these guys up. I'll actually cut and paste that. The fighters that these guys, Lucien Carbin from Fight Factory Carbin, Tom Harink from Chakuriki Gym, Johan Voss from Voss Gym, and Jan Plas from Mejiro Gym is also significant. I'm just going to paste that in. If anyone's interested, look these guys up, man. And you collectively look at their students that they've produced in the kickboxing world, and they've pretty well dominated the world of professional K1 and so on for many years. In 1965, Bluming was the first non-Japanese to be awarded the 6th Dan by Oyama, a controversial award that Oyama adamantly stood by, describing Bluming as his strongest non-Japanese student. In fact, there was such controversy that it is said that Oyama offered a reward. Jon Bluming says $100,000. I think it was $10,000 because with the Japanese yen conversion, you get confused. 10,000. He said anybody who can beat him, I'll take the grading off him, and not only that, I'll take my own grading off me, and I'll close down my dojo, and I'll never teach again. And only one person accepted the challenge, and that was this judo-based mixed martial artist from Korea. But he had the hell beaten out of him. Jan Kallenbeck and a couple of other guys touched him up, and then he said he just kept getting back up and go, I want to fight Jon Bluming. So he fought Jon Bluming, and the fight lasted as one punch, and he was unconscious. But anyway, that's an interesting story too. I just didn't put it in there because it's not, it's pointless. In time, however, Kyokushin began to train less in the all-round approach that Bluming preferred and more towards competition. After withdrawing from Kyokushin, he continued to train in his own system, Kyokushin Budokai, a hybrid mixed approach of hard Kyokushin-style stand-up fighting with the throws and ground skills of judo. With the benefit of hindsight, we can look back and declare unequivocally that Jon Bluming was well ahead of his time when it comes to the trends towards mixed martial arts. At the foundation of his attitude is the spirit of Budo, the spirit of Us. As Bluming said, my advice to newcomers in the art is look for a good teacher, not a commercial one, but a Budoka who made his way either as a fighter or a good sensei who can mold people into good senseis or good fighters like Oyama sensei and Kenji Kurosaki sensei. The translations from his Dutch to English are always difficult. Also into what you really want out of Budo, championships for the hell of it or self-defense, either for your work or the hell of it. In other words, if you work security, do you need self-defense? Or your military, do you need self-defense? Or just be in a good dojo with a good sensei who shows you the ropes where you can have fun doing it? Or altogether, do you want the hard style or the soft one? Look very hard into that. If you cannot learn anything more, or you are not at ease, or you want something else, look into that too, for life is too short. What he's saying is don't just be loyal for loyalty's sake, just find a dojo that works. If you just want a Dan, well, that's your right. You can buy that almost anywhere these days. I would like to relate a personal anecdote. In 1996, I was introduced to the judo great Gene LeBell, by my friend and grappling coach, John Donahue. I developed a friendship with Uncle Gene, that's what we call him, Uncle Gene, and had the opportunity to spend many hours training and talking with him about his judo and wrestling training and the martial arts in general. Gene had traveled to the Kodokan a number of times himself before judo entered the Olympics, and he too was undefeated whilst there. His judo was widely respected both in Japan and in the USA. And as a result, I find this interesting, not many people know this, as a result was chosen to referee the famous 1976 boxing versus wrestling bout between Muhammad Ali and Japan's Antonio Inoki. I was in Japan at that time. I remember there was articles and new television. Antonio Inoki was going getting guidance from Bill. Good to see you, man. Getting guidance from Masayama. But it's interesting. Gene told me the reason how he got that gig as the referee, because see, Gene LeBell's, I'd love to put all this in the book. There's just not room. It's not about Gene LeBell, unfortunately, but the anecdotes are fantastic. Gene LeBell's mum is was the first, if not the only, female to be. I'm sure there are more now because they have more women's boxing. But her name was Eileen, I believe, if I remember rightly, because my mum's name was Eileen. She ran the LA Coliseum, and that's where Cassius Clay and Sugar Ray Robinson and a lot of these fighters got their start. And Gene LeBell, as a teenager, learned how to box from Sugar Ray Robinson. And, the promoting was a bit different then. They'd sometimes stay there at the premises for weeks at a time. And Cassius Clay, I think his first fight against Archie Moore, if I could be wrong, I haven't even researched it, I'm just going off my memory, was at the LA Coliseum. And he started to, Gene was there, obviously. Gene was probably in his 30s, mid-30s. And he started to, Ali started to say that he's just going to knock him out. I mean, he didn't even believe that Moore could last a minute with him. He was just going to knock him out. And Gene, remember, was a pro wrestler. So he loved the whole show of the wrestling. Back then they were called hookers. They'd hook the neck, hook the jaw, and they'd hook under here, and they'd use body hooks. That's how they'd wrestle. And so they called the old hookers Luthez and Carl Gotch and Gene LeBell and so on. And so he understood the value of entertainment, and he actually convinced Ali not to knock out Archie Moore. And he said, "You got to make a show of it." And he said, and then Gorgeous George, I think, was the wrestler that he got Ali to start to look at for entertainment value. And that's where Muhammad Ali came up with the poems he used to write, A Total Eclipse of the Sunny and More in Four. And he learned that you didn't make money by knocking someone out in 15 seconds. You made money by entertaining a crowd. Very interesting anecdote. But the reason he got chosen for that fight was because of his connection to Muhammad Ali. They knew him very well. Angelo Dundee and Ali knew Gene LeBell. And Carl Gotch was in the corner of Antonio Inoki. It's quite an amazing event when you think about it. And Carl Gotch also knew Gene. They'd fought and they'd trained a lot together. So Gene was the only one that was known by both parties that was trustworthy, because there had to be someone with a bit of wrestling experience, as it turned out. And now we know the fight was a little bit of a farce, but in terms of what they expected, it had to be someone who understood wrestling and stand-up as well. And Gene was the one. How about that? Quite amazing. Where are we? His judo, this is Gene I'm talking about, his judo was widely respected both in Japan and in the USA, and as a result, he was chosen to referee the 1976 boxing versus wrestling bout between Muhammad Ali and Japan's Antonio Inoki. I asked if he'd heard of Jon Bluming, and he said no. And that was that. After a lifetime in the martial arts, he was, like Bluming, cynical. But unlike Bluming, Gene was generally publicly reserved and usually kept his cynicisms to more private occasions. Boy, I could tell you some stories he told me about his experiences with everyone from Steve Seagal and Bruce Lee and all these guys. They all came to Gene to train. I became familiar with Jon Bluming's name in Kyokushin in 1976. I later learned that even greater than his karate skills was his judo. In that area, he was world class, and he had also been undefeated during his years at the Kodokan. I finally met Jon Bluming in May 2006 when he was visiting Japan. During the time spent with him over 2 days in Tokyo and a further week in Holland later that year, I enjoyed many hours listening to his tales, anecdotes, opinions, and incredible experiences training with the likes of Masoyama, Judo's Mifune Kyuzo, 10th Dan, and Don Drager's, and also about Don Drager's important role in teaching him, I'm just going to change that, in teaching him about weight training. I also asked him if he had heard of Gene LeBell. No, he hadn't. I spoke glowingly of Uncle Gene and his judo, and Mr. Bluming was polite but doubtful. He smiled wryly. He used to do that. He'd smile wryly and shrugged his shoulders. If Gene was that good, he was sure he would have heard of him. I mean, this is you're talking about the judo world. The difference was Gene had never really trained in Japan. He'd gone to Kodokan to fight, and he was undefeated, but he wouldn't stay there for months at a time and train. He did most of his training in the wrestling and judo world of California. In April 2007, I had a message to say that he was in Los Angeles and was about to go and meet and train with Gene LeBell. I was very happy about that. A number of hours later, I received another message from him to say he had met Gene and was beyond impressed. We spoke on the telephone, and the usually incredulous Jon Bluming spoke at length about training with Gene. I wish I could do a Dutch accent. That'd really add to it, but I can't. He's the real thing. He taught me so many things I had not seen before. And that doesn't happen very often. I remember he said, he taught me so many things, and that doesn't happen very often. He showed me different ways to do ankle locks and wrist locks and how to use the pressure points. And I can attest to that. The experience you have when you grapple with Gene LeBell. Yes, I have a copy of the doco. That's interesting. Yeah, if you have a look at that, Mike, you'll see that it's Gene LeBell he's a referee. And he hadn't refereed much. And so if you're a referee, you can see that his reactions aren't the reactions of a professional referee. But he was the only one that was trustworthy. And in 1976, there weren't too many people who could referee a mixed martial arts match because he'd fought mixed martial arts, obviously, 13 years earlier. Yeah, there you go. Very interesting. But I can tell you from personal experience. In fact, what I'll do is I've got a photo in the book, but I'll take a photo of it with my camera, and hopefully I'll take it with the iPad. But you grapple with Gene LeBell, and literally there's a photo there. I'm putting this photo in the book, but that's Gene LeBell, and I don't know if you could see, but this is after we trained, and cross my heart, my face was all bruised up. You can't see it there. I don't know if you can see my face is all bruised up. You see all that red mark. I got bashed both sides, cross-faced. Oh man. And he was being nice. He was a 9th Dan in judo, yes, Paul. He was being nice. He'll lean on you and you go, oh, sorry, yeah. And I remember once he's doing a cross-face choke, which I now teach as a really extreme technique. And he literally said to me, I'm thinking, dang, he's going to break my neck here. And he said to me, relax, son. If you don't relax, I'll break your neck. I won't mean to. It'll just happen like that. And I'm going, all right, let me relax into this. And I think I went out unconscious for a little bit. But that's Gene's nature. He's, a lovable rogue. So when Jon Bluming says he taught me a lot of stuff that I hadn't seen, well, it's for real. He's the real thing. He taught me so many things I had not seen before. And, that doesn't happen very often. He showed me different ways to do ankle locks and wrist locks and how to use the pressure points. He ended the message by saying, he ended his message by saying, boy, that Gene LeBell really knows his stuff. I'm really glad I met him. Thank you. In 2010, I was in Los Angeles spending the day with Uncle Gene. I was studying his office wall, completely covered with certificates of recognition, grading awards, awards of gratitude, and honorary certificates in countless martial arts. One of them was actually a black belt certificate in Aiki Jiu-Jitsu dated about 1953. And I'm looking at it, and without a word, he looks at it, and if you know the story, you'll know what I'm talking about. He looks at it and smiles and says, yep, I was a black belt before. I was a black belt before that son of a gun was out of nappies. He's referring to someone he had a bit of a run-in with. I was in his office covered with certificates. One of the honorary certificates, dated 7th of April 2007, was an honorary 10th Dan in Kyokushin Budokai, Jon Bluming's federation. Bluming is well known for awarding honorary certificates, but 10th Dan certificates were rare. It meant he respected you as his equal. I commented, oh, you met Jon Bluming. How was it? Gene looked at the certificate and said, Oh, yeah, very nice guy. He's good, a very good teacher, too. He's knowledgeable, and I really respect what he did. I showed him some things he had not seen before. My own coaches, Carl Gotch and Lou Thez, it was a whole different world. Man, that guy really knows his stuff. And it was interesting. He used the same words. That guy really knows his stuff. Gene said also, Gene LeBell really knows his stuff. It was very clear that Gene was genuinely impressed with Bluming's skills. Now, Gene LeBell had mixed with everyone, and he never said a bad thing about anyone, but he never said necessarily a glowing thing about them. Like certain martial artists, he would go, I'd say, what was he like? Well, I'll tell you a story, another anecdote. Bruce Lee came to him to learn some grappling for the movie Enter the Dragon. Bob Wall, who was in that movie, is a good friend of Gene's and recommended he go and get some lessons. So Bruce Lee was training with Gene for a week or two for that opening scene out of Enter the Dragon. Bruce Lee, remember, is like 58 kilograms. Gene LeBell, his fingers are the thickness of two of mine. He's thick, he's squat, and he's super strong. And Bruce Lee, of course, was incredibly confident and arrogant. But Gene LeBell had seen it all. And Bruce Lee was saying how he was demonstrating his super fast stuff. And I'll go backwards first. I'll tell you what Gene said. I said, how was Bruce Lee? He said, what a gentleman. He said, what a gentleman. He said, and a real philosopher. He said, not just a pretend martial arts philosopher. He said he genuinely was a philosopher. He'd studied philosophy at university. He said, and fast. He said, talk about fast. He said, I've never known anyone faster. Well, that was his summary of Bruce Lee. I said, what was he really like? And he said, you mean as a fighter? I said, yeah. He said, I could pick the lad up like a twig over my head, and there was nothing. I could pick him up like a twig and spin him round over my head, and there was nothing the lad could do. And that I heard from one of his students, Hayward Nishioka, I think. That's what happened. Bruce Lee was telling everybody that he could do this, do that. Gene just walked up to him and picked him up and carried him around his head going, look at the lad, look at the lad. And Bruce got so angry. But what could he do? We're talking about Gene LeBell. In December 2018, I attended Jon Bluming's funeral, where he was honoured with a service by the Corps Mariniers, the elite Marines of the Royal Navy. And I have a picture. I'm still waiting. I hope they send it. I'm waiting for a picture from Holland to put in the book of Jon Bluming. Funnily enough, all those times that I spent with him, I didn't think to take a photo. I may have one or two, but it'll be lost in the archives. So what I've done is I've put a photo, that photo I showed you with Gene LeBell. I'll show you how I've got it in the book because I removed the background of it, and I added some copy. But you see, that's what I put. So I just put the author with a great uncle, Gene LeBell, 2010. And Gene said, you've got to have an open mind because you never can tell if someone has something to teach you to add to your repertoire. After Uncle Gene had met and trained with Jon Bluming, he said, man, that guy really knows his stuff. And that's a good enough comment for me because Gene is the instructor of my grappling coach, and my grappling coach is one of the best. Gene's only graded 5 people to black belt in his life, and one of them was John Donahue, who introduced me. Not John Danaher from Henzo Gracie in New York, John Donahue from Melbourne. But another anecdote about Jon Bluming. In 2006, when he was there, Mrs. Oyama, Mas Oyama's wife, was very unwell. It wasn't long before she passed away, actually. And I told him that she's quite unwell, and would he like to go and see her? And his eyes lit up. He said, yeah, for sure. So I spoke to Mas Oyama's daughter, and we arranged to meet Jon Bluming, and we took him to the hospital. And there was Mrs. Oyama in bed. And by this stage, she'd become quite withdrawn, almost probably a little bit of dementia. And she would just lie in bed like this. And if she heard someone, she'd open her eyes and look around and then close her eyes again. And I was used to it because I was visiting most days and, doing things with her, like massaging her hands and so on. But anyway, Jon Bluming walked in, and it was very intimate. She's lying there, and she was used to my voice, and she hadn't seen Jon Bluming for maybe 30 plus years. You remember that? At least 30, maybe 35 years. Anyway, she's lying there with her eyes closed, and he goes, "Chiyako?" Now, you would never call Masayama's wife by her first name. Anyone who's been to Japan knows that it's a little bit over the line, unless the only time you really call people by their first name is when you went to school with them. So I have friends that I was at high school with in Japan that we still they call me Cam-kun, which is a friendly way of saying Cam. And I call them by their first names. And she's lying there and he goes, "Chiyako?" And her eyes lit up. And she smiled, and I just hadn't seen her smile. And she instantly recognized him. And he was kind of in shock that the beautiful, beautiful Mrs. Oyama had become reduced to this frail little, shadow of her beautiful self lying in bed with dementia almost. And he leant over and he gave her a kiss on the cheek and he said, "It's okay now, John's here." And it was really quite but anyway, it was very moving, and you knew instantly that he had the most beautiful connection with her, and obviously with Masayama. And so, despite all the things that we hear about Jon Bluming and how he says this and says that about Masayama and says this, you have to remember that above all, he really loved Sosai. And the thing that he didn't like was the sensationalism of Sosai in the media. Remember, Sosai didn't call himself God Hand. All these things were things that other people said about him. And on occasion, he did say things that were a little inaccurate, and that's based on information that he got secondhand, not firsthand. And so I've gone into great length in the book, pointing out, first of all, that I've even got a whole section separating fact from fiction. And it's really important that people realize that whilst Jon Bluming did kind of really go all out and say things about Masayama, deep down he really loved Sosai. But the amazing thing was, we walked out of that room. He was there and he gave Mrs. Oyama a hug and he gave her a kiss. And then after a while we left. And as he walked out, I won't even use the expletive deletives he used, but he understood that Mrs. Oyama's state was a result of the way certain people in the organization had taken everything from Masayama after he died and left the family with nothing. One particular person, because of his high profile, was trusted, and he even went to the bank, emptied the bank account, took all the money, the cash out of the safe and everything like this, and left the family with nothing. Based on, Sosai says in the Kyokushin way that when he dies, he'll leave the family. The family will have nothing to do with the organization. But people need to put that in perspective too, that when he died, no one in the organization behaved in a way that I would consider to be ethical. Everyone, it was just a grab for the money. It all started with two people. I'm not going to mention names. There was one person and then there was two, and they never liked each other. So that escalated and they started to get their supporters and their supporters. And the next thing you know, you had a big split, then another split and another split. But whilst this is all happening, the family, Masayama's family, is like collateral damage. No one really gave a hoot and was left with nothing. Literally, Mrs. Oyama and her daughter were sitting in Australia. If your house gets possessed, you get to keep what's inside. In Japan, that's not so. If your house gets possessed, you lose it all. You lose everything. You lose your clothes, your pictures, your picture frames, your furniture. And they're sitting on their stairs while the people are repossessing everything out of their house, because the money that was put aside by Soulside for them to pay off mortgages and so on was all taken. There are a number of stories I could tell you, man, and there's no winners. There's no one who comes out of this looking good. It's just a real mess. And I've spoken to Mike Clark about it, and a similar thing happens in Goju and everything. By the way, Mike, thanks for your message about the Okinawa Kan too. And I had a great chat to Dennis May recently too. It makes me sad. It made Jon Bluming raving mad. He was literally, he said, where is this one particular, where is his dojo? Where? And I said, I was just around there. He says, where? And he was like the F words and everything. And he was literally on his way with a couple of his guys. They were going to go around and tear these people to bits. And at one stage at that time, one of the reasons he was in Japan was Maeda Akira, who was a student of Inoki's, I think, was facilitating a meeting between Jon Bluming and one of these Kyokushin people who brain is always about the money. If they do something, you know it's for the money. And they had decided to invite Jon Bluming back into Kyokushin. And so Jon Bluming was in Japan for one thing about fighters in Pride or K1, but at the same time, he was going to meet with this particular Kyokushin organization head who'd invited him back. And they sat down, and yeah, I really think I'd love to be able to do something about it. You know, I just don't know what we do. And the number of times, look, I could tell you stories, one after the other, that just break your heart when you see the real integrity of people. There's two sides to the story too, that, you know, it can be difficult. But anyway, so Jon Bluming has sat down with this fellow, this head of the Kyokushin organization, one particular organization, and his interpreter, and he said, we'd like to invite you back into Kyokushin. And Jon Bluming, okay, says, yeah, we think that, you know, you can be the head of Europe, and I think having you back would really help the organization. And Jon Bluming looked at him, and, you know, keep in mind, he's probably 30 years older than this guy. And he said to him, what point would there be for me to come back? And they looked at him, and they didn't realize that Jon Bluming was very acerbic if he wanted to make a point. He said, what is the point of me coming back? All you want to do is take advantage of me and use my name for your own personal gain. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. And he looked this in the face, and he said, you choose any 10 of your top fighters. And Gene LeBell, Jon Bluming told me this. I was actually outside the hotel. We met him in the foyer of the hotel after the meeting. You choose any 10 of your top fighters from anywhere in the world. I'll choose any 10 of mine, and we'll let them fight no holds barred. And the one who wins is the one who takes over and runs the organization. How about that? And of course, the Japanese guy's gone, whoa, no way, I don't want that. He said, all right, well then how about this? You're young, you're strong, you're fit. You and me, one-on-one, no holds barred, no rules. We'll fight one-on-one. And the one who wins is the one who takes over. How about we do this? And you can imagine these guys, this isn't quite the reception they were expecting, you know. They thought, oh yeah, that'd be nice. I'll come back and I'll be a little, you know, lap dog. And of course he said, one-on-one, you and me. How about that? And if I win, I'll run the organization. And the guy's just gone, this is completely not what we wanted. And he just said, get out of my face. He said, you're a child, you're an ignorant child, and you're just doing nothing. And then he met with Mrs. Oyama the next day. Now imagine if he'd met with Mrs. Oyama that day and then the meeting was the next day. I guarantee he wouldn't have even wasted time. He just would have grabbed the guy and choked him unconscious and bashed the hell out of him. It was just, and anyone else with him. He was so livid. And the only reason he didn't actually go around to the dojo was I basically talked him out of it, because if he did that, he would never have been able to get back into Japan again. I know that from personal experience and being talked out of things myself. So that was a very interesting series of anecdotes. The Gene LeBell one, right? Asked Gene, you heard of him? No. Asked Jon Bluming, you heard of Gene? No. Then they finally met, and then Jon Bluming rang me. He was almost literally like an excited. He said, "Man, that guy is so good. He taught me about this. He taught me about that. He taught me things I'd never seen, and not many people do that." He said that doesn't happen very often. So it was a very interesting time, and then, of course, Gene LeBell. Now I've got a little bit of an extra anecdote too. I speak to Uncle Gene LeBell, from time to time. He's getting old. His birthday was last week. I never ring him on his birthday because I can never get through, because it's from morning to night, just an endless stream of phone calls from people around the world. I always wait a week later, and I spent a good hour chatting with him today. And I told him I was writing a book about that I mentioned Jon Bluming in the book. And he was so excited. He's getting very old. You know, he's a real sweetheart. He goes, "Is that Cameron?" The nurse was there. She goes, "Hello." I said, "Oh, is that Midge?" That's his wife. I said, "This is, I'm ringing looking for Gene LeBell." And you can hear him goes, "Who is it?" And she goes, "Who is it?" I said, "Cameron Quinn from Australia." He goes, "Oh yeah, I'll take it." And he goes, "Is that Cameron, the wonder from down under? Are you still ugly?" That's what he says. But anyway, he's 88 years old, and he still has a very powerful mind in many respects, but he is starting to get a little frail. He told me today for the first time that he's actually stopped training because he no longer has the physical strength or the coordination to be able to train without hurting himself, and he's very sad about that. But you know, he was given the last time. Every time I ring him, I almost expect that he won't answer the phone. I'm sad to say, because in fact, just before his birthday last year, when I rang, he said the doctor had given him 3 months to live. And so I was ringing every few weeks. But anyway, here he is 12 months later, and he's still hanging in there strong. He said, "So, well, my doctor says this, and I say something else." And, you know, but I had a great chat to him today, talking about a lot of different things. And he's in particularly pretty annoyed about what's going on with the election. And he lives in California. And if you've ever been to California, it's a Democrat-run place where they've got lots of problems, and he's feeling those problems right on his doorstep. So he's not real happy about that. But anyway, if you've got any discussion, I'd love to chat about Jon Bluming. Yeah, he was quite amazing. I mean, some of his successes. There's a famous judo world champion, Inakuma Isao, which he beat emphatically. Well, I mean, everyone pays lip service, you know, to Sorsai's family. I remember one other organisation. Look, I could go on. It's pointless. It's just bad mouthing, and they're not here to defend themselves. But it's very sad, and it's very terrible what happened and the way they were treated. And Mike Clark pointed out that it's not unlike what happened when Miyagi Chojun died, and you had this this battle for control over Goju, and all kinds of dramas came in, and it was never really resolved. It's the same. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but the organization split into various groups. You had the Goju-Ryu, and you have the Goju Kai, and you have all kinds. You have different, dojos representing Miyagi Chojun. The catch of it is they're all legitimate students. This is the catch. You look at the Kyokushin organizations, and they're all run by legitimate students. They're all run by long-term students of Masayama. So they all have a claim to that lineage. And there was no will, even though the will stated Matsui, the will was thrown out in court emphatically, just like, and I even saw the will, and it's like, whoever wrote the will even spelled his daughter's names wrong. He used the wrong kanji for the daughter's names. So it was just a total fabrication. So it was thrown out in court. So there was no will. And if there was, it was in the safe, or it was, you know, the conspiracy theorists have a party with it, and someday someone will write a book. I don't know. It'll be me. I don't think so. But anyway, yeah, pretty sad time. Us, Mac, I saw your video. I think the way you did that was 100% fine. The only thing that I'd add is, instead of the thumbs being like that, which I couldn't see if that's what you're doing, the video was too small. I know that Sosai actually started to teach like that, so your thumbs weren't engaged. And that makes a lot of sense, because when you grapple, a lot of people, when they grapple, they interlock their fingers. And if you want to break your fingers instantly, just interlock your fingers while you're grappling. And all someone does is squeeze your fingers, and guaranteed you'll break 2 or 3 knuckles. So crossing the thumbs like that too makes the thumbs vulnerable. So the thumb's always tucked in. So from the front, you can't really see. You see that? But back from behind, you can see that they're folded. That's the only thing I couldn't tell if you're doing that. Otherwise, 100% perfect, Mac, what you did. Yeah, look, there are a few. Hang on a sec. This book is great. This is written by a buddy of mine, Willem Brunikev, the Kyokushin K1 Encyclopedia, and it's chocolate block. There's just tons of information in here. And I don't know where I'd find them, but he was a very good friend of Andy Hook. So there's a huge Andy Hook section, just page after page. Look, this is all the stuff I'm going through here. This is all Andy Hook. He goes, right, look, that Andy Hook chapter starts there. And it goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on, just page after page about Andy's martial arts history and experiences. There's still Andy Hook. Still Andy Hook. He's got a lot. He's done a lot of research on Andy. Bless his soul. But anyway, this book, I'm just looking, Chrissy. This has some great photos, including Sosai in my gi. You might know the story. When I was at Niagara Falls, had some photos. Sosai called me over and says, give me your gi. So all those photos of Sosai at Niagara Falls. He's got my gi and my 3rd Dan belt on. Whilst we're here, unfortunately, there's a will, there's relatives, yeah, that's true. Of course. Well, that's interesting. That's a good photo of Matsui and Dave Pickthall, man. That guy could kick. And that was at my dojo in Brisbane in '88. Matsui was staying with us for a month, and Dave Pickthall and Ian Thorpe came and visited. And in fact, I took that photo. They were so good, eh? Dave Pickthall tells a story about how he was showing Matsui clicker, the non-contact, British non-contact style clicker. And Dave Pickthall was like 5 times clicker champion of UK. He was a great fighter, you know. And he tells a funny story about how he was teaching Matsui clicker, and then they decided to do a bit of proper semi-contact and full contact. And he says, and he described it, if I haven't looked at it for 30 years, but he described it as, and then Matsui proceeded to show me who's the real boss when it comes to kumite. He was very interesting, quite humble about it. Yeah, that's it. What I did was, my good friend Dave Bunt Dave Bunt's an interesting fellow too. He was an English teacher in Japan who trained at Hombu, and he was Sosai's secretary for quite a few years as well. He spoke Japanese and he worked as Sosai's interpreter as well. But Dave Bunt was there, and Sosai said to me, called me over after I'd been over near the edge kicking. He called me over and goes, Ross, give me your gi. So I gave him a gi, and I looked at Dave. I pulled rank on him because he was my junior. So I said, you give me your gi. So I got that photo of Sosai and me and Niagara Falls. It's very natural seeing your students the other own way after the teacher's death. Problems to arise in junior students. Yeah, of course. What a nightmare. Got people who, I've got people who I graded to second dan, which means I was a fourth dan. I graded to first and second dan in different places, and they're now sixth and seventh dans. Was one of the organisations I seriously considered back in the mid-90s. Ultimately went to the IFK. It often boils down to personal connection. Watching, yeah, that's it. Yeah, you're laughing, Chrissy, but I don't think Dave Bunt was impressed. I'm looking for these photos of Jon Bluming. If I can find them, I'll show you. But there's some great shots, and when you see him, you do a YouTube search too. He was in a few movies here and there, and so there's one great movie of him. He's 6'5", and Luke Hollander, who did the 100-man Kumite. Luke Hollander was like, I don't know, 6'3", 6'4", and they were sparring each other in a movie. It was a fictional movie, but they were in the movie. But even with that, you can see the speed. They were very quick. Jon Bluming was very fast, and he gives all the credit to that to Don Drager, because Don Drager was very instrumental in teaching him about weight training, but he did it in a very careful way. He said the point was never to just put weight on. The point was to increase your power to weight ratio even as you increase power. And see you, mate. He took, yeah, it was, Bill. You're kind of correct. Mike, the famous photos you see, Mike didn't take them. Mike was the host. Mike invited us up. I was traveling with Salsa as the interpreter, and Mike invited us up to Rochester for the tournament. I did a seminar, and after the day after the tournament and everything, Mike Monaco took us to Niagara Falls. So very definitely he was taking photos. In fact, I probably gave him my camera and said, snap a few photos. But also the main photos that you see were taken by a guy named Kobayashi cameraman. So all the great photos you see of the Kyokushin tournaments, and the fantastic photos of Andy Hoog and Matsui and all those, they're all taken by Kobayashi. Kobayashi actually used to travel virtually full time, paid by his publishing company. And so he was almost assigned to Masayama full time when he'd travel. Dang, I wish I could find these photos. Can't find them. I must have gone past them. Sorry, Chrissy. But yeah, Mike Monaco. Thanks, Mike. Good. Mike Monaco was very definitely there on the day. In fact, I've got a great photo of us all in the group photo together. But the main photos, it was at that international tournament. The main photos at Sosai at Niagara Falls that were used in the calendar and stuff, they were taken by Kobayashi. Look, I'll wind it up. I just hope you enjoyed that. Leave a comment. I'd be really interested to know what people think about my including Jon Bluming in the book. Some people say it has no place, but I think he's a very important history in Kyokushin and a very important part of Kyokushin history. So I really wanted to include him. Plus, I really like him, and I found him very enjoyable and funny. He could switch from lightning to sunshine in a split second. And I remember there were a few things going on when I was writing this, I remember looking up my old emails and going back and reading some of the emails. Boy, oh boy, he had a way with words. Thank you very, very much, everyone. Us, arigato gozaimashita. I hope you enjoyed that. That's a great little story, and I think controversial or not controversial, he deserves a place in Kyokushin history. So that's why I've included him in the book. Us. Thank you, everyone. Us, Al. Good to see you training on Wednesday too. Thanks, everybody. Us, Daniel. I'll be coming down November, Daniel, going down to Wollongong for a grading. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate that. Hope you enjoyed it. Put the word out. Yes, he is part of the bigger picture. Us, Torbjörn, you were kind of quiet, but I know you're there, and I really appreciate it all the time. I think he's very significant, and I really did like him, and I liked him so much that I went from Australia to Amsterdam to the funeral. The next day, turned around and flew straight home again. I wouldn't have missed that funeral. Well worth it. Good to see you, Chrissy, Rachel. Thanks, everybody.